All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving headfirst into one of the biggest debates raging right now, and that is whether or not we should regulate AI.
It is the question, isn't
I
it?
mean, it's everywhere you look. Uh, think tanks are churning out reports.
Governments are drafting proposals.
Tech CEOs are writing op-eds. You name it, we got it all.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of articles here, and it really feels like there's a fundamental philosophical clash going on.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so you've got one camp that's basically saying, look, AI is so powerful, it has the potential to completely upend things. Like, we need some serious guardrails in place right now before things get out of hand.
So, like a preemptive strike against the robot apocalypse.
Well, not necessarily robots, but yeah, the concern is that AI could become so disruptive that we need to set boundaries early on.
Okay, I get that. But then you've got the other side saying, hold on a sec, too much regulation is going to kill innovation and we'll end up falling behind in the global AI race.
Exactly. It's this tension between wanting to harness the power of AI while also making sure it doesn't turn into, a Frankenstein's monster.
Right, it's like trying to tame a wild stallion. You want to ride it, but you don't want to get bucked off in the process.
A perfect analogy.
So let's start with Team Regulate AI. What are their big concerns? What are they most worried about?
Well, one of the biggest fears is AI being used for malicious purposes, and this goes way beyond just like robots taking our jobs.
Yeah, so I'm pretty tired of that narrative.
Exactly. It's so much bigger than that. We're talking about things like AI-powered surveillance systems that could erode privacy on a scale we've never seen before.
Okay, that's a little creepy.
Yeah, or how about algorithms that can create hyper-realistic fake news? I mean, it's already hard enough to tell what's real and what's not online.
Oh, absolutely. But hasn't that always been a concern with new technology? I mean, couldn't you say the same thing about the internet itself, that it could be used to spread misinformation?
True, but the difference with AI is the sheer speed and scale at which it can operate. An AI system can process and manipulate information far faster than any human.
So it's not just that bad things could happen, it's that they could happen so fast and on such a massive scale that we wouldn't even have time to react.
Exactly. And we're not just talking hypotheticals here. There are already real-world examples of AI bias creeping into things like loan applications and even criminal justice systems.
Right. And if we don't address these issues now, they're only going to get worse as AI becomes more integrated into our lives.
Precisely. So for the pro-regulation folks, it's all about mitigating those risks before they spiral out of control.
So it's a bit like preventative medicine, taking steps now to avoid a major health crisis down the road.
Exactly. Now, on the flip side, you've got the anti-regulation camp, and their main argument is all about innovation.
Right. They're basically saying, don't stifle our creativity. Let us build awesome things.
Pretty much. They argue that imposing strict regulations on AI development will just slow down progress and create a bureaucratic nightmare.
And their concern is that this will give other countries a competitive edge, especially those with fewer regulations around AI.
Absolutely. They worry that we'll end up lagging behind in the global AI race, both economically and strategically.
It's like we're in a Formula One race, but we've decided to put a speed limiter on our car while everyone else is flooring it.
That's a great way to put it. They argue that we need to strike a balance between safety and innovation.
Right, because it's not like we can just ignore the potential risks of AI either.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Regulate too much and we risk stifling innovation. Regulate too little and we risk unleashing chaos.
It is a tough spot to be in, no doubt. But that's what makes this conversation so important, because it's not a simple black and white issue. It's much more nuanced than that.
Right, it's not just about choosing between regulating or not regulating. There's a whole spectrum of possibilities in between.
Exactly, and that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. We'll be looking at some of those middle ground approaches that attempt to balance the need for innovation with the need for responsible AI development.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. Stay tuned, folks. Things are about to get even more interesting. Okay, so we've established that this whole AI regulation debate is, well, kind of a mess.
Yeah, it's not exactly a simple yes or no question.
It's more like, trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a roller coaster.
With a bunch of people shouting different directions at you.
Exactly. But before we all just give up and say, let the robots figure it out, let's see if there's a way to, find some middle ground.
And fortunately, there are some really smart folks out there who are working on exactly that.
Like, what kind of middle ground are we talking about?
Well, one approach that's gaining traction is this idea of co-regulation.
Co-regulation. So like AI sharing an apartment with like ethics guidelines.
not quite, but I like the image. Co-regulation basically means that governments and industry leaders work together to create these flexible frameworks for AI development.
Okay, so instead of the government just laying down the law, it's more like a collaborative effort.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that both sides bring something valuable to the table.
Right, the government has the authority to, set standards and enforce rules, but the tech companies are the ones who actually understand how AI works.
Exactly. So it's about bringing those two perspectives together to create regulations that are both effective and, don't stifle innovation.
Makes sense, but wouldn't that create a risk of, like, the industry having too much influence, like regulatory capture?
That's a valid concern, for sure. And that's why transparency and accountability are absolutely crucial in any co-regulation model.
So it's not just about getting everyone in the same room. It's about making sure everyone's voice is heard and that everyone's playing by the rules.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's co-regulation. What about this idea of AI regulating itself? Is that even possible?
It's definitely an idea that's gaining steam, especially in the tech world.
So, like, AI having its own internal moral compass sounds a little sci-fi to me.
Well, the idea is that you can actually design AI systems to monitor and control their own behavior, so they essentially have these built-in ethical guidelines.
But how do we know those guidelines will actually be, good? What if AI decides that, like, paper clips are the most important thing in the universe and starts turning everything into paper clips?
Well, that's where things get a bit tricky, and why many experts believe that self-regulation, while promising, needs some external oversight.
So, like, human babysitters for the AI.
Pretty much, because even the most well-intentioned AI can still make mistakes or have unintended consequences.
So it's like, having a referee at a football game, just in case things get out of hand.
Exactly. It's about having that extra layer of protection.
Okay, so we've got co-regulation, self-regulation with oversight. But even with all that, wouldn't it be impossible to monitor every single AI system out there?
You're absolutely right. It's just not feasible. Which is why some experts are suggesting that we focus our efforts on regulating what they call high-risk AI applications.
High risk, so like AI that's in charge of, launching nuclear missiles or something.
Well, that's one example.
Yeah.
But it also includes things like AI-powered healthcare diagnostics or AI systems used in critical infrastructure.
So it's like, in an emergency room, you got to focus on the patients who are in the most critical condition first.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing those areas where the potential for harm is greatest.
Okay, that makes sense. But even if we can agree on which AI applications are the riskiest, how do we actually regulate them? I mean, AI is evolving so fast that any rules we put in place today could be obsolete tomorrow.
That's definitely one of the biggest challenges, and that's why a lot of folks are advocating for what's called outcome-based regulation.
Outcome-based. So instead of trying to control the technology itself, we focus on controlling what it's allowed to do.
Exactly. So, for example, instead of trying to regulate the specific algorithms used in an AI-powered hiring system, we could set standards for fairness and transparency in the hiring process itself.
So it's like, you can drive whatever kind of car you want as long as you follow the rules of the road.
Exactly. It's about setting those ground rules without stifling innovation.
Okay, so we've got co-regulation, self-regulation with oversight, and outcome-based regulation. That's a pretty good starting point, right?
It's a good foundation, for sure. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to consider.
Ooh, and what's that?
The global landscape AI is a global technology, and the choices that one country makes can have ripple effects around the world.
Right, so it's not enough for just like the US or Europe to get their act together.
Yeah.
We need everyone on board.
Exactly. We need to avoid this scenario where countries are competing to have the laxest AI regulations, a race to the bottom.
Because that would just lead to a situation where, like, the most reckless companies win.
Exactly. And that wouldn't benefit anyone in the long run.
So it sounds like international cooperation is key here.
Absolutely. We need to be working together to create a global framework for responsible AI development.
But how do you even begin to do that when countries have such different values and priorities?
It's definitely a challenge, but there are some promising signs. International organizations like the United Nations and the OECD are already working on ethical guidelines for AI, and there are more and more dialogues happening between countries.
So it's like we're all kind of fumbling around in the dark right now, but at least we're starting to talk to each other.
Exactly. And that's the first step.
Well, I have to say, this is a lot more complicated than I initially thought.
Yeah, it's a tangled web for sure, but it's a web that we're all weaving together, whether we realize it or not.
So it sounds like the takeaway here is that we all need to be paying attention to this.
Absolutely. The future of AI is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play.
Okay, so we've talked about the fears, the potential benefits, and the various ways we might try to, like, wrangle this AI beast.
It's a lot to take in, right?
It is. But, at the end of the day, what can our listeners actually do with all this information? It can feel kind of overwhelming.
Well, first of all, give yourself a pat on the back. You're already way ahead of most people in understanding this stuff.
Thanks. But knowledge is power, right? What can we actually do with it?
Well, start by thinking about how AI is already impacting your own life, like those algorithms that decide what you see on social media.
Oh yeah, those are sneaky little things.
They are. Or maybe you're using AI tools at work.
Right. So many things use AI these days.
Exactly. And it's not about being afraid of it, it's about being informed. So start asking questions, like how are these systems designed? What data are they using? What safeguards are in place?
So it's like becoming a more conscious consumer of AI, not just blindly accepting whatever's put in front of us.
Exactly. It's about being aware of the choices that are being made and how they're affecting you.
Okay, so that's a good first step. But what else can we do? I mean, we're not all like tech experts or policymakers.
True, but you do have a voice. Talk to your friends and family about this stuff. Share what you've learned.
Right, spread the AI gospel.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of contacting your elected officials, Let them know that this is something you care about. Support organizations that are working on ethical AI development. There are tons of ways to get involved, even if you're not a coder or a lawyer.
So it's like being a citizen of the AI age. We all have a responsibility to shape this thing as it evolves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The future of AI is not predetermined. It's being written right now. And we all have a say in how that story unfolds.
Wow, that's pretty inspiring. Okay, well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you so much for being our guide through this crazy, complicated world.
It was my pleasure. Always happy to geek out about AI.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep asking those tough questions, stay curious, and most importantly, don't be afraid to use your voice. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.